In the glittering yet unforgiving world of global politics and celebrity diplomacy, certain stories simply refuse to die, and some deaths demand to be questioned. Among these, none has shaken the corridors of power quite like the haunting case of the late South African ambassador, Mthethwa. His name has become synonymous with mystery, corruption, and betrayal, a story that spans 2 continents and now, following a shocking leak from deep within Paris, threatens to expose some of the most powerful figures alive. What was once framed as a tragic, private ending has now evolved into a global scandal. The world first heard of Mthethwa's demise when news broke that the South African ambassador to France had been found lifeless at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Paris, a fall from the 22nd floor that French officials quickly categorized as suicide. But the deeper one looks, the murkier the story becomes. Tonight, we peel back that luxurious Parisian facade to expose the darker truths hidden behind it, truths that whisper of political warfare, betrayal, and murder. This isn't just the tale of one man's death. It's the revelation of an entire network of corruption, deceit, and high-stakes power that stretches from Pretoria to Paris. Because when you strip away the headlines and official statements, what remains is far more sinister than any suicide note could ever suggest. When the first reports emerged, they landed with the force of a bomb. Mthethwa, a respected diplomat, veteran of the ANC struggle, and former cabinet minister, had died in Paris under mysterious circumstances. French authorities confirmed that the 58-year-old's body had been discovered in the hotel's inner courtyard, directly below the window of the 22nd floor room where he had been staying. The initial narrative was established almost immediately. Investigators mentioned a troubling text message to his wife, an apology, allegedly expressing remorse and intent to end his life. The details that followed appeared to reinforce the theory: a forced open window, a pair of scissors found nearby, and reports of a broken safety mechanism. It was a tidy, almost surgically precise story, the kind that could close a case quickly and quietly. Yet to anyone familiar with the brutal undercurrents of South African politics, the explanation seemed far too neat. It was the kind of narrative built for convenience, not for truth. Those who had followed Mthethwa's career knew he was entangled in the nation's most dangerous web, a network of corruption and deceit that had already claimed more than one life. For them, suicide seemed less like an answer and more like a smokescreen. To understand the gravity of what happened in Paris, one must first grasp the immense pressure that had been building around Mthethwa long before he ever boarded that plane to France. His ambassadorship, appointed in late 2023, was viewed by many not as a promotion but as a gilded exile, a diplomatic escape route from a political storm that had been brewing back home for years. This was no ordinary civil servant. Mthethwa had served as Minister of Police and later as Minister of Arts and Culture, 2 positions that had placed him at the volatile heart of South Africa's political machine. During his tenure, his name surfaced repeatedly in corruption investigations linked to the state capture era, one of the darkest and most complex chapters in the country's modern history. Both the Zondo Commission and the Madlanga Commission heard testimony implicating him directly. Allegations ranged from political interference, such as pressuring officials to reinstate disgraced intelligence chief Richard Nloli, to accusations of siphoning money from Secret Service/funds. One particularly damning claim suggested that nearly R195,000 of intelligence money had been used to construct a boundary wall around his private KwaZulu-Natal estate. Though Mthethwa publicly denied any wrongdoing and claimed to have been cleared, the taint of corruption never faded. In political circles, he was seen as both dangerous and disposable, a man who knew too much, held too many secrets, and had too many enemies. Within the brutal game of South African politics, silence was the most valuable currency. And when silence could no longer be guaranteed, more permanent solutions were often sought. For months, the story of Mthethwa's suicide dominated headlines, slowly fading from public consciousness until a damning leak emerged from Paris. According to insiders within the French investigative team, individuals allegedly frustrated by political interference released confidential documents and forensic findings that completely shattered the official account. At the center of this leak lies the so-called suicide note, or, more precisely, the text message sent to Mthethwa's wife. Early reports described it as an apology, a final confession of despair. But the leaked transcript paints a very different picture. The full, unedited message, complete with metadata, reveals not a calm farewell, but a desperate and fragmented cry for help. More importantly, forensic analysis showed something shocking: the message was not sent from Mthethwa's hotel room. Instead, it originated several blocks away from the Hyatt Regency. That single revelation rewrote the entire narrative. It meant one of two things: either Mthethwa was coerced or lured away from his room before his death, or someone else entirely sent the message to fabricate the illusion of suicide. The implications were staggering. This wasn't a solitary act of self-destruction, it was evidence of orchestration, manipulation, and the clear involvement of third parties. That the suicide was beginning to look more and more like an elaborate cover story, one meticulously designed to conceal murder. The forensic evidence didn't stop there. Among the most explosive findings in the Paris leak were detailed photographs and laboratory reports from the hotel room itself. While early statements from French investigators claimed there were no signs of a struggle, the leaked files told another story entirely. The window safety mechanism, which had been forced open, showed damage inconsistent with Mthethwa's own physical strength or profile. Experts concluded that the level of force required suggested the involvement of a younger or professionally trained individual. This revelation alone introduced the possibility of an intruder, someone who had both access and skill. But perhaps the most incriminating discovery lay in the trace DNA evidence. Samples collected from beneath the window frame and on the pair of scissors found at the scene did not match Mthethwa's genetic profile. This foreign DNA, the signature of another person, has reportedly been entered into international databases. Its existence alone destroys the foundation of the official suicide theory. Once that detail surfaced, the conversation shifted irreversibly. What had once been labeled a personal tragedy was now being reclassified, quietly, but unmistakably, as a potential assassination. The DNA belonged to someone who had been in the room with him, someone whose identity could unlock the entire mystery. Whoever that person was, they weren't just a witness, they were the killer. If Ambassador Mthethwa was indeed murdered, then the pressing question becomes, who ordered the hit? And perhaps more importantly, why? The Paris leak suggests that the operation was not random. It bore the hallmarks of a coordinated, professional assassination, executed with precision and wrapped in an illusion of suicide. The conspirators behind it were not street criminals but individuals with the resources and political influence to manipulate an international investigation. Those familiar with South Africa's internal politics immediately pointed fingers back home, toward the tangled web of corruption, espionage, and political retribution that had defined the state capture network. Mthethwa was a weak link in that chain, a man whose testimony could have brought down high-ranking officials and dismantled billion-rand empires. His silence, therefore, wasn't accidental. It was strategic. By eliminating him, those responsible ensured that the secrets he carried, names, documents, and connections, would never reach the public eye. That his suicide was the perfect cover, believable, dignified, and quiet. But the Paris leak has destroyed that illusion. The final days. As the world reevaluates the truth, investigators are now piecing together the ambassador's final movements. Why was he staying at the Hyatt Regency, far from his official residence? According to multiple sources, Mthethwa had been preparing for a pivotal decision, one that could have changed the course of South African politics. Rumors suggest he was contemplating turning state witness, possibly cooperating with prosecutors or journalists to expose a network of corruption that spanned from Pretoria to foreign embassies. Others claim he had gathered classified documents, intending to leak them to the media. Whether out of fear, conscience, or desperation, Mthethwa appeared to be standing on the edge of a dangerous revelation. The timing of his hotel booking, made 10 days before his death, now looks chillingly deliberate. Was it a prearranged meeting? A final attempt to pass on sensitive material? Or was it the bait that drew him into a trap carefully set by those closest to him? The evidence suggests meticulous planning. The distant message, the forced window, the DNA traces, each piece forms a sequence designed to simulate suicide while concealing a murder. The entire operation bears the signature of a professional hit, not an impulsive act of despair. The identity that could break the case. The unidentified DNA discovered in the hotel room remains the most crucial clue in the entire investigation. Although its owner has not been publicly confirmed, insiders suggest the name linked to it could connect the crime directly to operatives within South Africa's intelligence community, individuals often referred to as the deep state. These covert agents, frequently employed to intimidate or eliminate political dissenters, represent the darkest arm of the country's power structure. If true, the revelation would expose not just Mthethwa's killers, but the very architects of corruption he had once served. His death, in that case, was not random, but a message, a warning to anyone considering betrayal. The international consequences are enormous. The French leak implicates both French and South African authorities in mishandling, or possibly concealing, evidence. It accuses investigators of bowing to political pressure and closing the case before critical questions were answered. A cry for justice. Across the globe, the phrase "justice for Mthethwa" is now echoing across diplomatic circles and social media alike. His death has come to symbolize something much larger, the battle between truth and power, between accountability and silence. What happened in that Paris hotel room is not just a murder, it is an attack on the very principle of justice. It is a chilling reminder of how far powerful entities will go to protect themselves from exposure. The message is clear: challenge the system, and you may not live to tell your story. But this time, the system has miscalculated. The Paris leak, released by brave insiders unwilling to remain complicit, has transformed a closed case into an open wound. The once untouchable figures now find themselves under scrutiny, their names whispered in the same breath as assassination and treason. The unraveling. South African authorities are now under mounting international pressure to act. The leaked evidence, especially the unaccounted DNA and metadata inconsistencies, demands a comprehensive murder investigation. Legal experts are urging the government to invoke the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, MLAT, to compel French officials to release their full investigative files. Meanwhile, Mthethwa's family continues to reject the suicide ruling, calling it an insult to his legacy and a betrayal of justice. They have demanded that both governments re-examine the case in light of the new forensic data. Diplomatic sources confirm that discussions are underway in both Pretoria and Paris, as officials struggle to manage the fallout. Behind closed doors, however, panic is brewing. For those who orchestrated this elaborate cover-up, the Paris leak represents more than exposure, it represents the beginning of accountability. The reckoning ahead. The implications of this unfolding scandal stretch far beyond one man's death. They pierce to the heart of how power operates, how secrets are protected, and how those who threaten to expose them are systematically erased. Mthethwa's death now stands as a symbol of what happens when truth becomes too dangerous to tell. But the emergence of this leak has shifted the balance. The very forces that once relied on fear and silence are now facing a new enemy: transparency. Every line of leaked text, every forensic photograph, every trace of foreign DNA brings investigators closer to the truth, a truth powerful enough to topple political empires. The story of Nosinothi Emmanuel Mthethwa is no longer one of despair, it is one of defiance. Because even in death, his silence has become the loudest voice in the room. The identity of those behind the Paris assassination, the true content of that final message, and the extent of the conspiracy that led to his fall are all on the verge of being revealed. When they are, The repercussions will shake the foundations of governments and expose the unseen machinery of power that operates behind diplomatic smiles. This is not the end of the story. It is merely the beginning of the reckoning, a pursuit of truth that will continue to follow every paper trail, every transaction, every whisper of corruption that led to that 22nd floor window overlooking the Paris skyline. Until justice is done, the world will not look away.